Hey, welcome to the fine print, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Caleb Teskey. Sorry, we're running a little bit late this afternoon, but I got a great guest coming back for the second time. We got Rusty Tapp from Cannabis Gold. I hope I said it right that time. Rusty, if you don't remember our first interview, he's a grower out in Hawaii. And boy, he just, I wasn't, I kind of hooked up with Rusty randomly. And when we started talking, I realized, boy, this guy really knows his shit. And I was super excited to get him back on the show. We're going to talk a little bit about the Hawaiian medical program and some of the legislation that they're trying to push through out there. In the meantime, Rusty said he'd be here in about 5. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody who checked out the Ben Cohen stuff. Oh, I got some hiccups. Really a lot of good feedback on the Ben Cohen story. Vermont Digger. Still waiting to hear from you guys. I know you got my story. Ken Picard, 7 days. Come on, man. Let's stop running puff pieces for these guys. It's time to go. News. Yeah, so what was the other one? The True Leave whistleblower, James Deese. Another great interview. The first couple here went really well. There's Rusty. He's backstage. We're going to bring him up here. We got the man waiting. Bang. Cannabis Gold here. Rusty. Let's see. Get him in there. Wham, bam.
What's up?
Rusty, how you doing, my man?
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me.
I got no audio. Shit. Let's
Can
see
you hear
if
me?
we can do audio. Let's see. Keep talking, buddy.
Yeah, so I'm here. I'm happy to be here.
Got you on the screen. No audio. What do we do, guys? Mike Crawford, call into the show.
Is there a chat?
Stop.
No, I muted my own audio. Oh, boy. Rusty, I'm going to kick you out. Can you try joining again in a second here?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if we can get Rusty back in here with some audio. We got face. Oh, wow. All right, he's back. Let's see.
Hey.
Let's try that again.
Can you hear me now?
Nope. Damn. I got no audio, Rusty.
My mic check was
I don't
working.
know what to do about that.
Give him a call.
I'll go back. I'm going to go back and put this on a fucking Zoom call if I have to.
Give him a call.
Let's see. Well, hang tight, buddy.
Yeah, it's all good. We'll figure it.
Call him.
Nope.
Can't hear you.
Oh.
Hey.
Hey,
do you hear me now? Coming through? Am I in there?
I don't have any audio on my end.
Shucks. I mean, the mic check looked like it was working here. I had some bounce in my signal.
Damn. Yeah, I got nothing. Let me
maybe try closing out your live, because it says you've been live for 4 minutes. Is that you already closed it out once?
I was waiting. I just did a little intro. You guys were here. Let me try it. I'll end it and try as well. Shit, so I can cancel.
We'll fire it back up.
Okay.
Add to the stream.
Yeah.
The people said they could hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you. Everybody else seems to be able to hear you. Oh shit, man.
Take your headphones off.
Yeah. Is it your earphone? The mic? I mean your
Oh boy.
your headset.
All right, see about now.
Any work?
I'm gonna send you a Zoom link and we'll just do this on Zoom.
That'll be fine. We'll give that a try.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I didn't have any issues with the first one, but I can't figure this out. And I'm gonna send you a Zoom link. Hang tight, buddy.
Oh, hey, it just says that you've unmuted my mic. Can you hear me now?
You probably could right as he was logging off.
Add to stream.
Yes. Check. Mic check.
I can't.
Mic check. Nothing.
Hold up. There we go. Try again. Hey, I'm just an idiot. There. I think. Try that now.
I hear you well.
All right, I solved it.
No. Good.
Please bear with me as I work through my technical difficulties, dude. I am not the tech guy here.
Technical difficulties. It's a thing. It happens.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Rusty Tapp from Kama'aina Gold in Hawaii. Rusty, thanks for coming back, my man.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. Talk story.
Yeah, this is great. For anyone who missed our previous interview, you know, Rusty talked a lot about the cannabis legislation and the program out in Hawaii. And we had a little follow-up conversation that really caught my attention. And I was hoping you'd catch us up here with what's going on. And also some shameless plugs for you in there.
Yeah. I love talking about cannabis. We'll be happy to share some of the stuff that's happening out here in the politics.
Tell us what we missed in the last 3 months.
Okay, so well, this legislative session was a big one. You know, we have the new governor in office this year. So, and he ran on a pro-cannabis platform. He, you know, the previous governor was pretty opposed or seemingly opposed to cannabis. So, with this new governor, there was an expectation to see more legislative bills, which there were a lot. There were like 37 maybe or something like that, bills related to cannabis introduced this session, which is much more than, you know, previous years. The existing medical licensees were especially keen to advance adult use markets. That was always framed as legalization here. The press called it legalization. And a lot of the community were not pleased with those bills. Those bills were like enshrining the existing medical licenses in the adult use market for a number of years. Those bills also were, they also contained language that would have maintained criminal penalties for, like, the transfer of an ounce, for instance, would have been a felony in those with the language that was included in that legalization bill, as it was called. That was, I believe, SB 669, if I remember correctly. So that was a big vehicle to push for adult use cannabis in the state. Again, met with a lot of opposition in the community. And ultimately it died in the House before receiving a vote on the floor. So that was the big piece in Hawaii's politics, really. Aside from that, there were a few other bills that were going to affect patients and caregivers and the existing collectives, as they're called here. We have a number of operations that have collected patient licenses and have accrued lots of plants. The biggest example is one in the North Shore of Oahu that has about 1,000 patients related to their operation. And
yeah, can you talk about the sort of the stacking of the licenses a little bit? Because I feel like that's something some people are kind of unaware of.
yeah, the medical patient and caregiver code was written in a way where some have interpreted the ability to bring as many patients together at one site as they would like to. There's ultimately no clear limit to the number of patients that can be on a site. So some have exploited what might be considered a loophole, I guess, but they've gone ahead and like I said, in the most vivid example, brought about 1,000 patients to one site. And I may have mentioned this earlier in our first podcast, but each patient in Hawaii is allowed to cultivate 10 plants. So when you think of 10 plants times 1,000 patients, we're looking at about 10, or the opportunity to plant 10,000 plants in one location, which is a great deal of plants, and it's a bigger operation. It begins to look like a commercial operation, I mean, at that scale. So the Department of Health and certain legislatures, and of course the existing medical cannabis licenses, don't see that favorably, I think. So they're going to be pushing back, and they did. They pushed back on those kinds of operations with the introduction of a couple bills. One was HB 1217, which was a bill that would have limited the number of patients per site to 50. It was also a bill that drew lots of ire by having language in there that would have limited patients' ability to use alcohol, for example, in a manufacturing way. So FICO, which is a really wonderful medicine, tinctures obviously often require alcohol, and other types of extractions, of cannabis will use alcohol. And so the language in that bill that limited patients or limited sites to 50 patients also was very restrictive in terms of what patients could do with their plant medicine. And that was not nice. I really thought that strange to suggest that patients would be like limited to just pulmonary use of cannabis. That, although that's common and it's great, there are patients that just don't smoke cannabis and don't want to. And so to limit them from having the opportunity to use alcohol was not patient friendly.
Well, currently in Hawaii, right, patients can make their own edibles, they can make their own concentrates, and this
Yeah.
bill would have sort of reversed that.
Yeah, it would have. It would have taken medicine out of our hands, the kinds of medicines people have been making for 20 years. We've had this medical program now for that long. We were one of the first states to enact medical cannabis laws, and those laws were all about personal cultivation. And for the longest time, there was not a dispensary model in place. So for a great deal of time, patients have been afforded the opportunity to legally grow cannabis, process it in the way that they choose, and consume it like in a brownie if they wanted to. This bill, HB 1217, I believe, would have even limited that. It would have limited the ability to make an edible with your own homegrown cannabis. So yeah, it was basically a rollback of rights to patients who really enjoy having the ability to grow their own cannabis and consume it. And in fact, they just simply, many of them simply can't afford to buy cannabis from one of the existing licensed dispensaries. And, you know, there's a price barrier there. There's also a convenience issue on these islands. Some islands like Molokai, they don't have an outlet there on that island, you know?
Nothing, huh?
So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of outrageous that, for one, that the state hasn't expanded the medical dispensary program, created more on-ramps for more business, like a lot more. That would have made a lot of sense in a lot of ways, you know. But they have limited our state to 8 medical cannabis dispensaries, which are vertical dispensaries for the most part. Now, that
Who owns
thing,
them?
that last bit has changed recently, so we'll talk about that in a sec. But
Who are these license holders? Are they like big MSOs?
and so there's like 3 dispensary operations on Oahu, 2 in Maui, 2 on the Big Island, 1 on Kauai. Different ownership throughout. You know, one thing that definitely strikes me about it is that I just don't see a great deal of Native Hawaiian ownership in these businesses. For one thing, that's an issue, I believe. For clarity, I think that the Native Hawaiian community has largely been marginalized by this approach. And their lack of representation and ownership of cannabis businesses is a problem. I mean, it's one of the reasons why the adult use bill was not seen in a helpful light, because it was it was about maintaining the existing licenses, and that, like I said before, was for a number of years. And the truth is, I think in those bills, the existing 8 licenses would have had the sole opportunity to operate in the adult use market for at least 2 years or 3, depending on which version of the bill you were looking at. And at that time, at some point 2 or 3 years down the road, a new cannabis authority would have the ability to issue new licenses, but certainly not required to issue no licenses. And we've seen in a few states bad examples of politicians coming through on vague assurances for expanding programs. So that was really a point of contention. But yeah, to go back a little bit, so this year, what did pass, it seems, at the very end, or more recently, was the HB 1028, if I'm not mistaken. And that bill did a lot to help the existing 8 licenses.
I think it's 1082.
So that bill did do some help, or provide some help for the existing 8 licenses, and really irrelevant to patients. So in summary, I guess this last legislative session was chock full of events. You know, there were bills that would have kind of codified collectives, although limited them to 50 patients per site. There were bills that would have advanced adult use cannabis here in the state. They call them legalization bills. We don't call them legalization bills. So there's also these sort of housekeeping bills, which is the one I'm mentioning now that did pass. And one of the big things in there is that these dispensaries, the existing 8 now, have some ability to transact cannabis between each other, manufactured products, flower. So that sort of begins to move them, or it certainly begins to move them away from being strictly vertical operators. Now there's some sort of wholesaling or exchange of product allowed between these licenses. This last bill, this housekeeping bill, also, increase the number of products they can sell to include edibles and pre-rolled cannabis. So those are wins for the existing 8 licenses, and they're stakeholders that have a great interest in these laws changing for a better business environment. And our position is we would love to see a robust industry. We would love for there to be a whole list of items, including pre-rolls and edibles, available for sale. We would love for there to be a lot more medical dispensing opportunity, as well as adult use opportunities to fortify our in-state industry and to sort of become consumer friendly, and yeah, just really truly just develop what is a resource to the state, a tax resource, another valuable crop for diversified agriculture here in the state, spur a lot of development, construction related type stuff would happen, of course, if they could expand this industry. But really, it's important for consumers, and medical patients are a very vulnerable group that just need not be marginalized, and they also need not be sort of price gouged, I guess, so that there's an easier time accessing what it is that patients need. And then, of course, adults that would just like to use cannabis, they would love to enjoy options. They would love, price competition, and they love supporting their local communities, by buying local. So yeah, there's a great deal of work that needs to still happen here in the state to create the industry that I believe everybody wants. And I say that, and I mean, including the existing 8 licenses. I think that they would like to enjoy, obviously, more than they have. Now they're just serving medical patients. And so we expect next year to be another big push. We'll see more bills introduced, I believe, to advance adult use, and hopefully to expand medical use with the sort of same enthusiasm. That's what I hope. I mean, I really hope that we don't just sort of leave medical patients, caregivers, and the community sort of behind to just promote adult use cannabis. Because while the products are essentially the same, the consumer is very different. Like I hear a lot of times people suggesting like, oh, there's no medical cannabis, or there's no need to delineate between medical cannabis and adult use cannabis. And I don't agree with that. I do think that the products obviously are very similar, but they can be focused to different consumer segments, and medical patients just deserve compassion. They deserve special care. I mean, and when I say medical patients, I think I'm including elderly folks on fixed incomes, young people with certain health issues, that aren't maybe, flush with the kind of income that is necessary to support one's needs. And also, medical patients can have a greater need, like certain medical patients need a whole lot of medicine, and it can get quite expensive, like prohibitively expensive. If you don't have the right to grow your own, or if you don't have the right to work with a caregiver or a cooperative collective, if you will, something like that, to reduce the overhead of the types of plant medicine that you're looking for.
I wanted to stop you for a second, because it sounded like you told me that on one hand, they're trying to pass this bill that would ban medical patients from making edibles, and on the other hand, there's a bill that just got passed that carved out some extra exceptions for the dispensaries to make edibles.
You got that right. Yeah, you got that right. And that really kind of puts a head on what it is that is the issue here. And I mean, we have legislation that seems to attempt to drive consumers into 8 privately held businesses, and legislation that doesn't create paths for those who would like to enter cannabis, for providing products to patients or for adult consumers. So yeah, that is the issue. I mean, we see the legislature almost working solely on behalf of the interests of 8 licensed businesses, and attempting to strip away the rights that we've enjoyed for 20 years to grow our own, make our own products, and avoid having to pay out of pocket a great sum of money to obtain the kind of medicine people are looking for. So you kind of nailed it there. Yeah, on one hand, we're going to create a new list of products, including edibles, for the retailers, and then we're going to take that product out of the hands of the patient caregiver community. So
Didn't you also mention that this bill might have given police the right to like show up to your house if you're a medical patient?
yeah, that was one of the other really touchy points of this HB 1217, I believe, prior to amendments. And I'm not sure, I mean, the bill eventually died, but in its
What would be
process,
introduced though is kind of frightening.
it was really weird. I mean, to say that they would have the ability to come and search your location, and I think in generally that was just really vague language. I mean, patients in Hawaii have a greenhouse or a backyard or a basement or a spare bedroom, and all of those places are suitable to be cultivating cannabis under this medical program. The scope of a search is always an issue when it comes to like law enforcement. Like what are they searching? Of course, is a question. And yeah, it didn't sit well with the patient community to imagine like an enforcement officer showing up and looking at your garden. Maybe let's say you're in full compliance, your garden's looking wonderful, plants are tagged, you're at the limit or below it, and then they say, well, let me go and look in your kitchen and your refrigerator to see if there's any brownies in there or something, or maybe in your cabinet you have a bottle of 190 proof alcohol or something, and then all of a sudden you've got a problem. So yeah, the language was vague, and it did seem to overstep like personal property rights, rights to avoid like unwarranted searches and so on. So yeah, it was a breach of trust, I think. Like I said, for 20 years patients have been entrusted by the Department of Health, the state of Hawaii, and our law enforcement to abide by the set rules of numbers of plants and so on. And then at this stage, while we're talking about advancing adult use, which in my view is just clearly demonstrating that there's not a great public health or safety concern. I mean, if every person over 18 can possess cannabis, I mean, is it realistic to think that somebody might buy cannabis and then go home and make a batch of brownies with it? Of course it's not.
God
So
forbid.
yeah, I mean, just to pick on patients who, like I said, are the sole existence so far in this state of the need to use cannabis, to all of a sudden subject them to some kind of levels of scrutiny, just didn't seem right at all, and unnecessary. Yeah.
You
So-
mentioned when we spoke on the phone that the list of qualifying conditions is pretty tight still in Hawaii.
Yeah, I can't speak too clearly on that. I know that it includes things like AIDS, severe pain. I mean, I think epilepsy might be on this list, but there's a list of severe issues there. It doesn't include
Where you're like, oh, I hurt my thumb. I need a medical card.
Well, honestly, not unlike California with its medical program, there is a push for people to get medical cannabis cards. For instance, the existing 8 licenses can't serve anybody without a medical cannabis card. their interest is for more people to go get a medical cannabis card. Obviously, there are lots of health professionals that believe in cannabis, and so they're the types who are not looking to withhold cannabis from patients who are seeking it. So I don't think that while our list may not be extremely long and extensive, I do think that there's generally physicians in Hawaii that are willing to and wanting to encourage cannabis as medicine. There are businesses that want that, and
I wish we had some more.
to get back to the point of the list, one thing that's not on there is like the inability to sleep. I don't know what you would call that again. Insomnia. So I know that's an issue that people use cannabis for. It's just one of those types of things that's not on the list. So yeah, the list can grow. We would like to see the list of qualifying conditions grow. No question.
I know in Vermont, it was odd to me that those kind of conditions were determined by the legislature and not doctors.
That is strange. That is very strange. Yeah, in my view, doctors should be able to prescribe cannabis to their patient for a whole long list of reasons, because we do know cannabis can help in many, many ways, ways that go beyond the current list, no doubt. So yeah, that's something I think a lot of health professionals and even like I said, businesses are looking to see that increase. We want that to increase here. From all I can gather, that
seems like a no-brainer. Even if you're Curaleaf, it's like, hey, that's going to bring more people into your dispensary, right?
Precisely. So I don't think there's a controversy about the need for medical cannabis seeking patients to be able to access that. That's a win-win for everyone there, as far as I can see.
Now I'm going to just do a shameless plug here. Boom, Rusty Tapp, come on, a gold here, joining us live from Hawaii.
Mountain Crown. Yeah, I put that mountain crown together. That thing there is like it's my trademark symbol. It's symbolic of our mountain range. We have 3 main sort of summits on this island, and yeah, I kind of rendered it to look something like a crown at the same time, and I call it the mountain crown logo. It's it's something that we use now. We're gonna keep that going along with our goods that are entering commerce, which are hemp products so far.
Cool. Yo, before I forget, I wanted to ask you, because I remember you saying something about just the sheer number of people in the medical program in Hawaii that don't shop at these dispensaries, because it sounds like because of maybe the plant count and the medical home grow bill. Is that? I'd like to hear that a little bit.
Part of it, Hawaii, like Northern California, has been a place of has held a strong cannabis community. There's been a lot of cannabis cultivation in Hawaii over the decades, going way back to beyond any medical cannabis program. So a little bit here is that, like in the 80s, Hawaii was thought to be the largest producing area in the country. Like the law enforcement agencies called it $1 billion industry that was here in Hawaii, growing and selling cannabis illegally at those times completely. Not that was fair, but that's just what it was. And so yeah, Hawaii has a rich history of cannabis growing here. And then when in 2000 we got these medical cannabis laws that allowed us to have plants at home, and that didn't change everything, but it certainly brought the plant a little closer to home, and many people began to engage to get their cannabis prescription, to enjoy some personal cultivation. And like I said, that started in 2000, and we didn't have a dispensary program until 2016. So for over a decade, people became really accustomed to growing their own cannabis and using it. So, then when we have these dispensaries open up, for one, a lot of people thought that it was really strange to have just 8 throughout the state, and so people began to sort of get a bitter feeling about these businesses from the onset. Many people were decidedly not going to be shopping there. For one, not to support a business model that was developed this way. Two, because they already have their own cannabis. We're growing it, for maybe decades in some people's cases. They were just not interested in that or needing that. So these businesses like literally grew out of a community and a state where cannabis was already easy to come by relatively. I mean, it wasn't like something foreign in this state. I mean, it was rarely common to see cannabis smoke in the air at any concert you went to. It was not something totally hard to come by, really. Like I said, in the 80s, this was such a thriving sort of industry, I guess you could say, that they launched their drug war tactics extremely heavy in Hawaii. In this area where I'm sitting now is Puna. Puna was a big target for cannabis eradication. And this community weathered that storm just like because you have to. You just, whether you were growing cannabis or not, you couldn't ignore the helicopters flying over your head and searching your property, regardless of if you were growing cannabis. They were intent on finding it, prosecuting it, eradicating it, all of those things. So there's a bit of a rebellious nature in some parts of our communities. Those that have been involved in cannabis, who dealt with the drug war firsthand, and those folks, I'm sure, myself included, just didn't have an inkling to shop at a medical cannabis dispensary. An economist reported some time back, a couple of years ago, maybe now, that I can't remember if it was 20% or 30% of medical cannabis card holders were actually shopping at dispensaries. So yeah, to your point, the large majority of card holders and patients have enjoyed cultivating for themselves, not needing to go to a dispensary. But it's a thing. I mean, I believe patients would like to have an economic opportunity in cannabis. So I think that, like in the case of these collectives and cooperatives that exist, like those that have 1,000 patients at a site, I'm not sure that those would exist the way they do now if there was a clear path to, just provide cannabis without having to stack licenses. I mean, if there was just a way to establish a business that would engage in selling medical grade cannabis to patients, I'm sure there would be a lot more dispensaries and cultivation sites than there are now. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Rusty, because it does seem like these MSOs and so forth like to operate in the limited licensing sort of states where they have control of the entire market. But it seems like Hawaii is one of those states, and they're still struggling.
Yeah, and that really does kind of just point to the fact that Hawaii is not completely unlike a Northern California community. Because I mean, you think about somewhere in the Emerald Triangle, that cultivation has been a kind of a key piece in the local economy for decades prior to any event of relaxing the laws. So, like, can you imagine there being like 8 cannabis farms in the Emerald Triangle? No, so, yeah, Hawaii, their lawmakers have certainly sort of copied this limited licensing scheme that propagated all over the country. I think the businesses enjoy that. I think because it creates sort of an artificial scarcity, it creates a value in the license itself, or it has in the past. But I think we've arrived at a time where the MSO type of business may not look at states like, or places like Southern Oregon, Northern California, Colorado as highly desirable on their menu, simply because there is such a strong background of cultivation and a consumer base that is pretty educated and experienced with cannabis, and sort of like a natural defense, I guess, again, from corporatized cannabis. People here are surely not craving some version of corporate cannabis. I do think that people here are craving a path to participation. I think that they're, like, again, this is an agricultural state. We have a beautiful climate for growing cannabis. We have a legacy, of producing cannabis.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, heaps of people with experience with cannabis here that would love to be able to, refine their craft, put it out there, and either make it their sole business or a side business or something like that. I mean, I myself I'm an entrepreneur and I do many different things. Land development's one of those things. Farming has always been one of those things. We have cash crops like coffee, avocados, ornamental tropical flowers. The list can go on and on. I mean, cannabis should be a part of that list. I mean, for people who have facilities, who have farmland, I think to limit participation in cannabis is rather absurd, and you can sense that if you check my Twitter account. I generally, aside from trying to represent Hawaii as a classic legacy area with a climate and a history and a story to contribute to the national and global cannabis community, I tend to promote ideas about freedom for people and cannabis. I tend to promote ideas that are based in inclusion, broad participation, competitive markets. Yeah, and I stand for that. I'm not ashamed to advocate on behalf of the consumers that need choices and lower prices and different ways to access cannabis, but also businesses that need to be able to develop sustainable business models, environmentally friendly sort of ways of producing cannabis. I'm all for that. I'm obviously not a proponent of indoor cultivation. I think we're past that at this stage. The plant itself, it shouldn't be kept in buildings. You know what I mean? It's a plant, and it belongs in the sun. Is my thinking.
I agree with you. Although that's a little easier to say when you live in Hawaii, but yeah, I do agree with you.
Yeah. Well, you point to a good thing. Every area in the world can grow cannabis. Really, cannabis is one of those special plants that grows in wide geographic areas. I mean, from Maine to California, to Alaska, Hawaii, Thailand, Colombia, Europe. There is no end to where cannabis seems to be able to be grown sufficiently. My vision of cannabis in the future rests in a sustainability model. Like, I think the plant serves humanity in that way. I think its utility is to support plant-based renewable life cycles and a balance in our environment. So I hope that that's the message people are getting when they think about cannabis and hemp. I hope that that's just the light that goes off in your head is like, wow, here's a plant that's so useful. It could be our clothes, our shelter, our food, and our medicine. Renewably, it can help us, on a soil level. It can help us on a cleaner air level. It can help us on, human health levels. We should embrace a lot of that. And I think wrapped in all of that are lots of great business opportunities, like abilities to, engage in commerce on different levels to reap profits, which is what business is. Business is about making money. And so, I think there's good
Would you
ways.
say that the waters actually in between the islands are actually like protected? So you can't even transfer between islands?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's, I believe, federal space, so I think transporting cannabis between the islands is equivalent to transporting it interstate, just about, or something similar to that.
That's wild.
That brings up that issue with the existing 8 licenses, creating this language in the recent bill about them being able to exchange cannabis. I don't have solid answers on that yet. I'm not sure if the bill somehow is a workaround for these 8 businesses to share interstate or intrastate. I don't know if it's something that gives them special privilege to move cannabis between the islands. I will say, though, that the testing laboratories that exist now, I think there's one, to be honest. I think we're down to just one analytical lab, and they do have some special permission to transport cannabis from, for example, the Big Island to Oahu to be analyzed. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some special caveat where they're allowed now to move cannabis across this boundary, this federal boundary, as it were.
What's the name of that lab? Do you know?
Yes, it's Spectra Analytical. They are the lab that hemp farmers must use, myself included. We must use the only approved lab to ensure our hemp is compliant. So we have a testing requirement before we harvest hemp, and Spectra Analytical is that lab. It was previously Steep Hill, Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So I think there was some license.
When did they change their name?
Fairly recently. I think it was within 2 years or so, I think.
Steep Hill in Vermont also changed their name to Onward Analytics.
I'm sure it's not. Well, there's a price related to licensing. So I'm thinking that these labs may have found it helpful for a while, perhaps to establish some reputation.
We're also being sued in Arkansas for falsifying some results.
Yeah,
there's a lawsuit going on.
Oh, that's a subject there. That just it's a plague on the industry. The false lab results, phony labels, that stuff.
You only got one fucking lab, dude. I mean, that seems like you're asking for trouble.
There were 3 at one time, but to my knowledge, well, we were using, just 2 years ago, we were using 2 labs. When we first started cultivating hemp, we thought it would be wise to have an analysis from separate labs, just to compare the results that we were expecting different results. And sure enough, there were different results coming from 2 different labs given the same sample. So, that points to a big issue. One of the overhanging issues for cannabis, the legal cannabis landscape now, is all of these claims to safe and tested cannabis are a little flimsy. I mean, safe, is that because it's doesn't contain specific microbes, or contains specific microbes at a lower threshold, or is it safe because you can read the label and know what you're consuming? Well, I think there's been a lot of evidence that shows the label is inaccurate, which means that you actually don't know what you're consuming. There are great limitations on the label in terms of we're only testing for, X, Y, and Z, and there's like a lot going on in the cannabis plant. Some, hundreds of metabolites there in the plant that we're not looking at or knowing about or testing. So I think while the test is a small glimpse into the constituents of the plant, it is just that, a very, very small glimpse. And it's often inaccurate. And then when it comes to the microbial exam, I mean, I'm not sure there's a lot of evidence to support that the risk in consuming cannabis, whether pulmonary or some other form, is greater than the risk of consuming tobacco. Certainly, I mean, tobacco products have been found to contain harmful bacteria and fungi. You don't see a lab test for those. You haven't, so I think, but it's also very well known that could be harmful to your health.
Sure.
And so I think that's fair. You know what I mean? People should know that, smoking anything could be harmful to your health. But it really hurts the industry to create layers of regulation that end up costing the producers a great deal of time and money, which then translates to extremely high costs for consumers. And if the goal is to transition the traditional market to a regulated market, it may well be that some of these regulations need to go away for the viability of business, and also because it may be deemed that it is safe enough. I mean, there is anecdotal evidence over centuries that humans are smoking cannabis and they're smoking other things. And I just think that to imagine a world where humans don't want to or choose to smoke something is fairy tale like.
Yeah, that world doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's the goal? Genuinely, do you think that they want to bring? I mean, it seems like these limited licensing states, it seems like that's the exact opposite goal, where they clearly don't want competition and they don't want people to be able to be successful, from at least where I'm sitting.
You're asking a really good question. Is legalization, as they framed it, genuinely about ending prohibition and ending the harm of the war on drugs, or is it a move in the direction of adding another pharmaceutical ingredient to the list of pharmaceutical products that are being pushed through these very profitable, very powerful players in industry? I think that's the best question of all. We don't see the unregulated or traditional markets going away in the presence of, limited licenses states and really high regulatory moats or barriers, I should say. It's a great question. Are these regulations in place to actually stifle this transition and sort of make it a clean handoff to pharmaceutical industries, tobacco or alcohol industries? I think that's a really great consideration. I think that anybody who's in cannabis, whether you're on the, outside of a legal framework or working within, I think that it's good to ask yourself, what is useful in terms of these regulations to foster a business environment that's sustainable or foster restorative justice, I guess you could say,
Hey,
like
to alleviate
these the societal damage that's been taking place over this war on drugs. That's really, I think, the heart of a lot of the concerns I have about the regulatory environment. You nailed it there. I mean, unfortunately, like with respect to hemp and CBD, for instance, we know that the FDA has approved Epidiolex. Epidiolex, based in CBD as its active ingredient, is doing fairly well. If I think I can remember Matt Lammers from MJ Biz Daily, I think, citing recently that Epidiolex sales were over $1 billion last year.
Wow.
While I think the entire cannabis industry in Canada might have been less than that. I'm not sure, but and I think the point he was trying to make is that, like, the medical efficacy of cannabinoids is promising. There's no doubt about it. If you were going to compare the pharmaceutical industry, which is extremely profitable, to today's cannabis industry, which is extremely difficult to create a profit, then you might think that you might see where this could be going. Also, the FDA's sort of it's a punt, right? They didn't take the bull by the horns with respect to CBD food products and how to regulate it. They kicked the can to the legislature.
That was weird, right? Because Epidiolex has, right? I remember them issuing this story. Oh, we don't want it used in food or as like a supplement or anything, because there's still these lingering safety concerns. It's like, well, then how did it pass the clinical trials? Why is it already FDA approved if you still have all these lingering safety concerns? You know, like, explain that shit.
Yeah, I don't run clinical trials. Maybe one day we would be a part of something like that. I think that's great. I mean, I do think that cannabis medicines is a frontier, you know, that needs to be explored. The endocannabinoid system, plant, like I said, there's hundreds of constituents, metabolites in this plant that need to be explored for its potential use. In the meantime, so hey, there's a great opportunity for those businesses that want to take up medical cannabis research. I think that, honestly, if I were, I mean, you see a lot of these businesses that go ahead and get a medical cannabis license and seem to not pursue medical cannabis research at all. It's more about, like, let me get a medical cannabis license and then be in position to sell recreational cannabis or adult use cannabis. And I'm not sure that that's a wonderful business model. It doesn't seem to be panning out well currently. And like, I guess to go back to my very early point, is that there is truly a difference between a medical cannabis patient's needs and an adult's recreational cannabis use need. I think that does set up for different business models. Certainly those that are looking for clinical studies targeting ailments. And then there are those that are looking for, popularity and brand and formats that are just the most palatable to the adult use consumer. I think that those business models diverge, and I've been looking to see whether these large medical cannabis operators, the Tilrays, the Canopies, the Curaleafs, the Truliefs, these ones that kind of showed up talking medical cannabis and have simply just sort of rested in the world of adult use cannabis, really not pursuing novel intellectual property, not pursuing clinical trials, to my knowledge. So I think that's, as we're at this inflection point in the cannabis industry today, I think that many businesses, if you're interested in it, if they're invested in it, I should say, would be looking for a pivot. They'd be asking themselves, maybe I should go a different direction or double down on these these celebrity branded packages or these like direct to consumer models, the consumer packaged goods type stuff. So yeah, that interests me. I like to look at cannabis through that lens of just the macroeconomic scope. Here we have some kind of a trouble on the horizon financially, economically, seeming like some big power shifts and different kinds of struggle at a global scale. The lawmakers and lawmaking not really caught up to the reality of the consumer and the consumer habits with cannabis. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how this kind of moves going forward. The plant itself, I mean, the lack of research so far in cannabis plants is still a big picture that needs to be filled in. I mean, you'll hear me pointing out the fact that we might be at peak strain name or something from time to time. Like, we have been breeding cannabis for thousands of years for specific things, and we've sort of recently bred to highest levels of THC and maybe specific terpene profiles. Often we're breeding in controlled environments. So as far as like looking at the plant's ability to contend with natural environments, natural pests, different metabolites. I mean, things that we aren't even haven't been identified yet. But we're just not quite advanced yet with cannabis plant biology. I think that's. I mean, from my business point of view, Sheen of Hawaii is about plant technology. Combine Gold is a company now we're working with hemp because of its federal legality. We have a lot more ability to expand our plant counts and really look at a different set of cultivars. I mean, I've collected THC type varieties for decades, and I'm excited now to have a collection of CBD rich or plants that just have a different and unique set of genes. And so the future is wide open for plant breeding. And when I say plant breeding, I mean plant improvement, which is to really focus on specific genes or specific qualities of the plant and try to bring out the best in those qualities. And in my case, that often means resistance to high humidity environment where I am now. It means targeting specific commercial cannabinoids, THC, CBD off the top, and maintaining these plants. The sort of turn and burn that takes place so far, where plant genetics are lost and then wanted. I mean, there's been in my world, the White Widow came through Hawaii in the 90s and really impressed upon consumers and growers. And today we were proud to collect some hybrids of that.
Nice.
The Sheen is one. But the cultivar, the specific clone that we were growing widely then, is not easy to come by. And those who are claiming to still have it are not really thrilled about its health and condition. And so we see the need for plant science to just continue to develop around cannabis in a big way. We're excited about it.
The studies seem interesting too, because it seems like they're doing a lot of the studies like in isolation, where they're just isolating one cannabinoid and then doing a test of that. And then they're like, oh, well, look, it's not getting the results you want. It's like, well, yeah, use the whole fucking plant maybe. But, due to some of the funding issues and things surrounding that, it seems like, it's a very limited amount of people doing testing. And it seems like most of them are looking more for negative effects than, helpful effects at this point.
Yeah, science is a labor of time and commitment and money. You can only test one variable or hypothesis at a time. You know, that I guess is a good point, because for years people have been doing this work with cannabis, with their nose, with their mouth, with their eyes, which is really, really valuable. Like
Right.
people know what they like. They know what's good. We've been sort of honing in with our senses on these things, and science gives us just a different set of tools to look at these things, to study them, and to make determinations. Then that is it. Um, it just is a great deal of time. Plant improvement, for instance, like to talk about breeding for a specific trait, um, you're talking about years, almost a decade could easily pass for a plant scientist to develop the cultivar that they are aiming for. We have in Hawaii have a long history of plant improvement. One of the reasons why we are here is because it is a great place to study plants. Um, it's an environment suitable for this. My wife is particularly specialized in the subject. I'd like to, give a shout out to my wife Celia. She's a sweetheart, mother of a beautiful son now, and we're a really happy family, and we're really a family that is all about cannabis. And she's going to be instructing the very first course offered at Hilo, specific on cannabis this fall, which we're excited about that. It's one of those doors we're kind of kicking open right now, which is great. We're proud of it. We've been pushing on that for years, and it's just finally become the time where the administration and the dean of the College of Agriculture has sort of opened up to it. So we're going to be, leaning into academia as much as we can to pull out useful information, things that can help guide us and guide, hopefully, the industry at large to better outcomes for growers, producers, and consumers who are, deserve the best.
Can I just do a little deflection here, because there was something I wanted to ask you about the Hawaiian Cannabis Authority.
Yeah, Hawaii Cannabis Authority, that doesn't exist now. It was the regulatory body that would have been established if the adult use bill had passed.
Okay.
The adult use bill would have, in the language that it included before it faded away, was included the Hawaii Cannabis Authority to be a body that would oversee and administer the entirety of cannabis in Hawaii. It would have put an executive director in charge. There, I think, would have been a number of appointed members. That's other kind of interesting. These would have been appointed individuals, not elected individuals, that would have had the reins of this cannabis industry here in Hawaii. Everything from like establishing licenses, enforcement of rules, administering fees, collecting fees, just everything and anything related to cannabis would have been all under this new branch of government, the Hawaii Cannabis Authority. Like I said, it would have had an executive director, which, it doesn't sit well with me. I don't like the idea of one appointed government official having a whole great deal of power over a nascent business opportunity that very, very many want to have some kind of involvement with, and very, very few currently have involvement with. And so, we know that we're just in a moment where cannabis is ripe for corruption. Like we see it all the time now. I mean, from LA to New York. I mean, there's a lot of dysfunctionality in the rolling out of cannabis programs a lot of that has to do with licensing and the gatekeeping of licenses. There is a lot of business opportunity at stake here, and so it's just ripe for bribery. It's ripe for corruption, and that's just what's taking place. We don't need that. I mean, that's one of, I think, my big thrusts is that hemp is not limited in licensing. Hemp is cannabis. It's products can be made from hemp that are even intoxicating or psychoactive. They're being sold all throughout the state, our state, and the states. You never heard of social equity related to a hemp license, and that is because there is equity in the path to achieve a hemp license. In other words, it's non-discriminatory. You can be rich or you can be poor. You could be a farmer on farmland, or you could be somebody who lives in an apartment. And if your desire is to enter, the struggles of business with hemp, good luck. You know what I mean? You can get a license just like you can get a license to drive a car to grow hemp. As far as I'm aware, the USDA has no limit to the number of hemp licenses that they'll issue. And it's just not it doesn't require to have $1 million in the bank. It doesn't require even owning a certain piece of property. It's really simple forms. It's a simple form. It's not like an application process with a lottery or any of that kind of silly stuff that we're finding in cannabis with THC. And I think I always like to juxtapose those things, because we see a whole lot of corruption on the side of that issue where there are limited licenses, where the advocates are, touting this social equity slogan. And, I'm not buying that. I mean, I'm not in any way in support of limiting people's participation in growing a plant, producing a plant in a safe space, and selling a plant product. I mean, to me, it boils down to farming, good old traditional agriculture and manufacturing of agricultural products into value-added products and then sold. I mean, we see farmers markets all over the country. We see restaurants, we see bars, I think we have the model already. It's maybe the oldest business in the world, you know what I mean? Agriculture, food. And I think that cannabis could fit neatly into those regulations without having to, reinvent the wheel. And that's really my position on policy. It's just that we need not make it so difficult. And if we actually just sort of look at what hemp is, and as a plant commodity, a federally legal plant commodity with some regulations, I think there's room to improve in hemp. For instance, like the testing requirements, I think we could start to relax some of that personally. But if we treat, cannabis, whether it's hemp or the THC variety, as a food type crop, and we cover, public health and safety like we do with food, I think that it enables the marketplace to develop as it should, with competition, with consumer options and availability, with different business models to pursue, and with profits to be made. I think that there should be a cottage industry for cannabis. People who don't have millions of dollars to get off the ground, and just want to mom and pop it, and have no plans or desires to grow beyond that scale. I think that should be one. I think I actually really like that idea. That's my idea of a good business right now. Is
like people could grow in your tent at home and grow your little, grow 5 or 10 pounds of weed a year and sell it and make a little extra money if you want, or something like that.
Why not? I think that as we were talking earlier, if the goal is to transition an unregulated market to a regulated market, I think that might be the way to do it.
And you said that you wouldn't get a license maybe until the regulatory environment changes. And I was curious, like, I was going to ask you, like, what would you have them change tomorrow if you could?
Well, let's see. The biggest thing that just jumped in my head is testing. Testing requirements are a little onerous right now. I mean, if I have to test the plant in the field and then test the plant in the product and on and on and on, that may be just unnecessary. Also, limited licenses. Like, I would feel strange ethically about winning a license. I think it would be a little odd, to be like privileged to have the opportunity to compete in business. I think that it should be a level playing field where, you all are going to have to put the pieces together. The simplest things that I wouldn't change would be like zoning. Like, I think it's an agricultural crop, and I would be just fine if cannabis was regulated similarly to bananas, is a good example. My family grows bananas.
Right.
We respect that you're going to need an agriculturally zoned piece of land to be commercial growing bananas. We respect that you're going to need a Department of Health approved food safe facility to process bananas. But I would also need and want my products to go directly to consumer. So I think the big three things would be maybe testing, licensing, like to remove limited licensing, and then have a path directly to consumer. That sounds like a viable business to me, but if I'm going to be sort of stuck having to test extensively and then be limited to selling my product to a middleman, a distribution or a distributor or a processor, or on and on. Like, I feel like that starts to squeeze the margin to a point that's unpalatable. Like if I'm going to make some profit on a farm growing like microgreens, sprouts, mushrooms, any, tea, like just dried herbal tea. Like, there's a lot of things you can grow and make some money because you can avoid some certain regulations. Like, if I'm going to make an herbal tea and go and sell it, I don't need to have all my herbs tested every time I harvest them and then have all my tea tested every time I dry it and prepare it. Like, and the economics are getting kind of harsh. I mean, the retail level, cannabis consumers are used to acquiring an ounce of flower for somewhere around $100 up to $200 an ounce. It can be less than that. It very well likely will be less than that, if we expand this industry and more competition comes online. So I don't know. I think that, to enter a business, you really have to do your due diligence. If you're going to be paying a 280E, take notes, you know what I mean? Like, and be sure that you're not just going to drag your investor into no man's land.
You're going to want to read the fine print on the 280E for sure.
Yeah. So, I guess to put a fourth point on the list of things that I need to want to enter cannabis would be the removal of the 280E. That makes doing business extremely hard.
Oh, wow. What about delivery? What's your stance on delivery?
Oh, it should be there. Absolutely should be there. I think farm direct should be there. I think that, like the farm gate sort of style of things that sort of emerged out of Canada is very appropriate. I know, people love to go to the source. They love connecting with the source. If I were going to purchase a bottle of wine, I might thoroughly enjoy visiting the vineyard and tasting, their product and then making a selection. those are just wonderful experiences that, consumers use to connect to the products that they love. I think that that's all good. Delivery is wonderful. In fact, we just got a message today that somebody in New York, a friend of my wife's, just got their delivery license. They'll be able to do door-to-door stuff in Harlem. So proud of
Cool.
that. Proud of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's fucking awesome.
I bet you can sell some good amount of weed in Harlem.
I hope so. I hope this brother takes off for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting towards the end here. There was a couple other things I wanted to ask you about that are just kind of a little all over the place. One of them was the Hawaii Island Cannabis Industry Association.
Okay. Yeah. That's the group that represents the existing 8 licenses. And I actually don't think they represent all 8 anymore. I think when they, in their inception, represented all 8, received funds, I think, from all 8 to support their operation. And that's to more or less a lobbying organization that works directly to influence policy, and certainly to influence policy in favor of the existing medical cannabis licenses. So that's an organization the community has some contention with, because again, the community is at odds with the current policy dynamic, and that group is responsible for promulgating these bills. Largely, they're a big piece in writing these bills and encouraging their sponsorship by legislators. They work nonstop to advance the interests of the existing medical licenses. So that's HICA. We say HICA often out here, HICIA, Hawaii Industry Cannabis Association. And yeah, they're not a big fan of mine. I don't like HICA for all that they've done. I think that they have also limited their business's potential. I believe that these existing 8 licenses should embrace expanding the industry. I don't think that it helps or serves them well to limit the industry's growth. I feel like they've had a great early mover advantage, if you will. Like, they have a facility, they're operating. I think it would be helpful for them to perhaps acquire other businesses that develop and that develop well. I think it would behoove them to be able to accept, products from other businesses that develop wonderful products that consumers gravitate towards. I think that there is a lack of infrastructure in our supply chain now to readily support an adult use market right now. I mean, these businesses, 8 of them, I imagine their entire cultivation footprint is less than 100,000 square feet.
Damn.
So if we were to transition to an adult use market tomorrow, medical patients could be really out of luck. I mean, the shelves might be empty, and honestly, they might be kind of scratching their heads saying, well, where's our supply coming from next? And, I guarantee you they want to be selling gear out of California and Oregon, wherever they can get their hands on it cheaply. And brands that are popular, I'm sure they would love to push those through the state, and I mean, I don't blame them for that. But at the same time, Hawaii is notoriously lacking self-sufficiency. Like, our food security is minimal. We are letting money leave the state by not building in state. And so I think the community would actually rally to begin supporting the existing 8 businesses if their policy messages were inclusive. Like I said, I think that they've kind of HICA by taking the action to like strangle the industry and try to like funnel all consumers into their doors, have branded those businesses as like not friendly to patients, not friendly to Hawaiians, not friendly to even the state. I think that the state, the state's deal is they want tax revenue, and when you sort of stifle the growth of the industry, I think that you miss the full potential of tax revenue if that's your interest, like the states are looking for.
Which it is. That's their interest for sure.
Yeah.
It sounds like you also mentioned you tracked some lobbying payments to the governor through one of these organizations, maybe?
Yeah, I work with the Hui. The Hui is an organization of community activists, a lead attorney who is experienced in cannabis policy, and yeah, when we looked around, we could see that HICA or the other licenses were beginning to put money into the hands or into politicians that they thought would have the ability to move their agenda. The governor. So we have seen is the recipient of some kinds of lobbying money, I think is what he would call this. The Speaker of the House, I believe, is on that list. The heads of certain committees in Congress, those like the Health Committee or maybe the Ways and Means, and I'm not positive about that. But I think what we've uncovered, is that there is money flowing into the hands of politicians to support the agenda of the existing 8 licenses. And that really is of no surprise. I mean, as far as I've learned, access to politicians comes with comes by the way of lobbying. And as far as I know, lobbying is essentially making some kinds of promises, providing some kind of, grease on the palm, if you will. Yeah, I mean, they're just that's just what it is. And politics is not, my forte, that's for sure. So I'm kind of coming around to looking at it more often than not now, just because it's an interest of mine to be able to participate in the cannabis business. And as a participant in hemp, we need changes. Like here in Hawaii, as a hemp producer, we're not allowed to sell pulmonary products. We're not allowed to sell edible products. That's strange because we find those products for sale all over the state. So they're being shipped in here, from Colorado, Washington, Oregon, California, or Vermont, wherever. Yeah, exactly. We see that good gear. I mean, the people are making hemp products like CBD.
Are you getting stuff from Vermont out there?
Jars of flower. Yeah, the name of the brand is lost on me now, but it's they're selling tinctures. I think I don't see Vermont quality pre-rolls or jars of flower, but I do see those products. Like I think from Colorado out here a lot. So smokable hemp products are available to consumers in Hawaii, yet the licensed hemp producers in Hawaii are unable to make them, which is it's just backwards. Yeah, it's backwards.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, and I mean, the hemp community has pushed some bills through this year too. I don't know the status on them. The last I checked, they were going to receive a vote. So this is the furthest a hemp-specific bill had made it through the legislature so far to potentially expand the list of products that local hemp producers can sell. I don't think there was language in the bill that would have explicitly made it legal to sell a pulmonary product, but I think the language in the bill would have allowed for the Department of Health to make determinations going forward and not have to be kind of stuck in the legislative process to make those decisions. So some rulemaking kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, and we're working on that. I mean, we're playing our role in that to some extent too.
It sounds like you maybe had some of these marijuana policy project guys out there doing some lobbying as well.
Yeah, marijuana policy projects sent out Devon Ward to be their lead attorney in policy making here in Hawaii related to cannabis. Devon just came out of Colorado, or no, Connecticut, excuse me. So Devon had been working in Connecticut. I think he's in part responsible for the debacle that is Connecticut's cannabis industry. And yeah, he showed up here. He's got connections to Hawaii. He spent, I think, some time growing up here. He's got some family that lives here. All in all, seems like a guy who I'd like to sit down and have a good time with. But his job is to put forward a policy that is totally unacceptable to us here in Hawaii, to myself and to Native Hawaiians. He was in full support of this legalization bill, which would have not created any paths, to a regulated environment. It would have had limited licenses. It would have created this Hawaii Cannabis Authority. Basically, all the things that we don't want here in Hawaii, he was more than happy to get behind and support. And we see, differently on the subject of cannabis and its and the policy around it. MPP to me is no friend to moving out of prohibition the right way. I think that they stand to kind of promote and enact the type of policy that to me is just a different version of prohibition, like one that I don't support whatsoever. And unfortunately that they're not alone. I mean, MPP, along with the Last Prisoner Project, Normal, and Hawaii Cannabis Industry Association, all of these groups were more than happy to put their weight behind a bill that they framed as legalization that just, to me, is nothing close to legalization. It's a shame, really, that our national cannabis advocacy organizations are seemingly captured by some special interests that are just unfavorable to people. The sort of the kind of incrementalism that we see going on with this, with their jargon is just phony. It's baloney. My patience has been worn thin. I mean, this is not new. I mean, cannabis is thousands of years old. Hemp is a staple of humanity, one of the first plants ever cultivated by humans. People are still in jail. To write commercialization bills that would continue to put people in jail, continue to put people through the criminal justice system, to leave people in the criminal justice system, that's all unacceptable. It's far from what I consider to be real legalization, even further from what social equity might be.
All the representation from the criminal justice system getting seats at the table is also really troubling to me. It's like,
Yeah,
lawyers and cops and oh, great. Just we need more of that shit.
Yeah, Devon, what struck me about Devon was that his profession prior to cannabis advocacy is criminal defense for cannabis offenders in Connecticut, I guess is what he's been doing. So, I mean, his job has existed because of prohibition. So here comes a guy who's made his livelihood because people end up in the criminal justice system over cannabis. And, he's talking about, we're here to help. And in that, they're willing to just continue to put people in the criminal justice system instead of standing up firmly against that. Another thing that struck me about Devon, we had him on a live. My wife and him had an interview on our Instagram account, Fresh Farms, by the way. If anybody wants to follow Fresh Farms, we do some stuff about cannabis there, of course. Yeah, he he admitted that there really is it's that the exchange of cannabis between two consenting adults he views as a victimless crime. I believe that's what he said. Um, I think that it's a victimless crime. I mean, two adults sharing cannabis, whether there's some money exchanged for it or not, I don't think that there's a crime. I don't think
Right.
there's
No victim. There's no crime.
so to say that and yet throw support behind a bill that would have criminalized the exchange of cannabis is a bit hypocritical. And the other thing what shocks me is that a lot of these advocates talk about the need for testing for safety, right? Like it's like the mantra of legal cannabis. It's tested, it's safe, blah blah blah. Well, he, as it turns out, is a member of a collective that the big collective, the collective I talked about earlier. So, here's a guy who's participating in a card stacking sort of enterprise, and then turning around and supporting legislation that would curtail that type of thing and even potentially bring enforcement upon that kind of thing, as opposed to building legislation or policy that would make it really easy to transition, a medical cannabis growing site to some regulated path, I guess. So yeah, I found that to be a bit disturbing, really. That here's a guy who's talking about like the dangers of untested cannabis in one breath and then turning around and saying, but I get my cannabis from a place that really doesn't require testing. So, haha. That's just the kind of hypocrisy, the contradictions I see, coming out of the talking heads that represent the so-called experts and advocacy agencies that exist now in this country. And
there's a lot of experts out there, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah. And for all of the expert advice that's been given, it really is appalling to see an industry struggling as bad as it is financially. It's appalling to see the people still in prison for cannabis and for the threats of enforcement upon those who are, participating in any cannabis activity. New York comes to the top of mind as I'm saying this. Like, there's 1,400 shops, they keep saying in the press, that are dispensing cannabis in some way, shape, or form in New York. Why don't they have an easy way to become legit? Why can't they just be kind of folded into some kind of legitimate thing, being like, all right, just here's what you're doing. If you could just do this, this, and this, you're A-okay. You know what I mean? Like, if you can provide some inventory receipts, if you can do this, just the basic things that are required for any business. Otherwise,
and give us the tax money.
Step right up and play and and be good about it. Instead of like, oh yeah, there's no license for you ever or in the foreseeable future. All there could be is enforcement for you. Like all there could be. Yeah.
Sell it off.
Yeah. And I mean, if I were a producer, like I know there's some producers in New York that would probably love to have 1,400 retail locations to shop their product to, as opposed to having like 7, which is, I guess, what they might have currently. So like, it's just dysfunctional, like when you try to centrally control something like cannabis, which was there before. It's not, again, the thing that really is making, I think, it's so difficult for this industry to roll out as the politicians want it to, as the press would like it to, as the advocates say it will, is the fact that it's not new and that the businesses aren't doing something that wasn't already being done efficiently. They're not, they're selling flour, hash, pre-rolls largely. You know what I mean? Like, these are things that people were buying, making, selling, all of those things. So yeah, I think that it's wild that there are this many experts, because it's funny, like I don't want to be I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm just a farmer, you know. I'm looking at it from like, oh, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm looking for paths to supply, you know, goods to people or services, make a living, provide for my family. Um, you know, and I'm a member of a community. You know, I'm a part Hawaiian, so you know, when I go out, I see my family, I see everybody, you know, in the community looking around, saying, "What's next? What's a great opportunity?" You know what I mean? What can we do together, uh, individually, or what? I mean, what's good? Can we make some money? Can we make a living? Can we provide for ourselves? And cannabis is one of them things that, you know, historically in Hawaii has been a source of income. Like it's a just
As
like
it should be.
and it's been good. I mean, it supports local businesses. We talk about the ghost town like scenario that's taking place in some towns in Northern California. I don't know about that, but I've seen things myself that do point to the fact that it's getting harder and harder to make a living growing cannabis, whether you're on the legal side of it, the unregulated side of it. Um, so, you know, I'm not going to play like I'm a hero that can come and save everybody and make everybody flush in some way, shape, or form. So I think that you know, claiming to be an expert in cannabis is sort of strange because we just have a lot to learn about it. I tip my hat to the people who've done great work and continue to. People have devoted their lives to it, you know, and I'm not trying to take away anything from anybody, you know. And I think a lot of good natured people are trying their best. I just don't think that um, you know, I just don't think that the I really just think that fear kind of drives so much of the policy conversation still. I think it even drives some of the science that we're seeing, you know, still. Um, and so I just think we've got a long way to go. And I appreciate the commitment that people have made to cannabis and to policy and to move cannabis from where it was to where it is. And I just hope anybody who's involved in this will continue to humble themselves, um, work for the plant, work for the earth, and work for people, and really just try to put, you know, really sound ethical decisions in front of greed and um, corruption, nepotism, cronyism, things that tend to, you know, really distract and take away from meaningful progress. It's something I like to have fun with. You know, cannabis to me is a bright spot. It's a happy thing. But when you think about the reality of people suffering in crime, people suffering in poverty, um, and then on the other hand, the like reach, the quick reach for money, um, it it's disturbing. You know what I mean? Like I'm in a position to be patient um, and fortunately, maybe that's just because my family's been in cannabis for 50 some years. You know, I'm a part of a legacy of cannabis producers. My family's been doing this for long enough that I don't feel any urgency. You know, I mean, the plant is and the uses of cannabis are just not going anywhere. I think it can go up. I mean, people could choose cannabis over alcohol, choose cannabis over tobacco, choose cannabis over opioids, choose hemp over plastics, you know, choose, yeah, like to use cannabis for something good. I think that there's a great deal of benefits coming. And I do want those benefits to be more equally distributed than they have been current up to now. You know, I think that the policy needs to address that. So when I do make cries about, you know, the corruption, the greed, um, the environmental impacts of cannabis production, and on, like I think it's fair. You know, I mean, I'm not seeing what I think is the end game. I'm not seeing success in its fullest form. I'm not seeing social justice. I'm not seeing legalization. So there's a
I
lot
believe
of
you did. I believe if you said something like, the only thing that makes me happy is watching these guys lose all this money, or something like that.
One thing is true about me when it comes to like business. I think people should succeed or fail upon their decisions. So if a business made really bad plans or poor strategy or failed to execute, I think that I find it enjoyable to see the roller coaster that is the pursuit of business success. I myself am an entrepreneur. I've failed more times than I've succeeded. I think it's just lovely to accept your mistakes, to like acknowledge where you may have uh, fell short in either planning or execution. And like, I think humility is something that may be lacking. When I see cannabis businesses struggling, you know, I'm not like, oh yeah, great, people are out of jobs. Like that bothers me actually, to know that like the cannabis industry was like touted as some promise, as some great thing, and people were attracted to go to work at some firm, and then that firm goes belly up because of poor management or just poor planning or on and on. Like I see that it's not all good, you know what I mean? I'm not like celebrating like destruction, but I do have a bit of a like a free market capitalist bone in my body. So like I do think that you deserve the merit of doing well, and you deserve the beatings of just doing poorly.
Of
So
not growing good weed.
last thing I want to see is the government coming to your aid. Like I do think that a lot of these bad decisions were made just because of the policy environment that was designed. Like people thinking, oh man, we've got it wide open, and there's no competition because we're on a limited license and da. Like it's like, oh, so you got over your skis. I mean, as somebody who likes a little extreme sports from time to time, if you haven't wiped out, you just haven't even been playing. Like so you gotta fall. It's part of learning about what you can and cannot do, what you should or shouldn't do. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me at all to see a business struggle. Like, I think it's great. I think there's more opportunity.
Especially some of these, just they seem like they don't treat their employees very well, and it's just like, good, you shouldn't fucking do well. Go away.
It's a bother right now to see the picket line, green thumb industry employees having to step outside and really, cry for the help that they shouldn't be, needing to demand. I mean, that's goes right to the heart of the ethical mishaps that are taking place in this industry to now that need to change. I mean, that's just not good. I mean, I see all these job losses, people shutting down huge facilities in Canada, for instance, towns that were kind of, once vibrant and bustling, promised, oh, here's our new shiny industry, just left to, struggle. And that wouldn't hurt as bad if the executives and the business themselves, if the business itself sort of reoriented, and we're going to like be like, oh wow, we really learned some things. We really have to respect like the craft grower and the small business and this, that, and the other thing. And maybe we should, you know, realign our business values or our business models to adapt to what hasn't been working.
Crazy.
So yeah, I do like where we are in this industry because it's maturing, and I think to mature and as an industry, you're going to want to see some mistakes made, and people should be learning from them, and then making change and moving on, and no crying tears over that, that's, greed is a problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, when I see when I see the executives getting bonuses while their business is hemorrhaging and they're making layoffs and so on, it's appalling. When I see businesses like Trulieve spending a fortune on lobbying efforts to, protect their business from competition or whatever, limit patients from being able to grow their own cannabis, and then laying off a bunch of people. I mean, in their case, they've done some severe harm. Like they've harmed. They're a stunning example of just how bad corporate cannabis can get.
Yeah, when people start dying in your factories, it's like, hey, what the fuck's going on here?
Oh yeah, it's a real shame, really shame. It's a heartbreak actually to have to mention them. I'm kind of sorry. I wish I hadn't, but yeah. So I know that this isn't what we want yet. It's not what we need. It's not what people deserve. It's not what workers deserve. I thank you for taking your time to be a promoter of um, this industry from a perspective that isn't just like gonna coddle to the corporate narrative. We all have a different truth, and everybody's pulling their truth to their side. Unfortunately, the corporates have greater power in persuasion with the media at their fingertips, money. You know what I mean, to push these narratives wide and far. So my hat's off to you for taking the time with me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Taking the time with others like myself who just aren't pleased with what we're seeing out of politicians or out of corporate cannabis businesses, celebrities, so it's appropriate that we keep spreading this words of positivity, but also pointing out that there are things that need to be rectified before we're all singing kumbaya. Yay, legalization has been just the best thing ever. So we've got a ways to go with that, and I appreciate you taking the time with me to sort of get some of this off my chest. People can know me better by having these podcasts. It's Come On to Gold on Twitter. My Mountain Crown logo, Come On to Gold. Yeah, we're in hemp. We love hemp because we can do good with hemp. But we're big on the cannabis scene. We're pushing for better days.
Rusty, did we miss anything? Let me ask you before I get out of here. Did we miss anything? Or you got any shameless shout outs or plugs you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I do actually. So we recently had this Jungle Cup. The Jungle Cup is a thing. It's been running around for a few years. We've had about, I think maybe this is the third or fourth annual, but we have won it in the past. I have a cup, first place flower. I'm really proud of that. But while I was there this time around, it was just a week ago, I got this cool shirt. This is a kalo leaf, taro leaf with the pot leaf inside of it. This company here is good people. This is my Kanaka brethren and sistren, Farron, shout out, and the brother, Herbo and Daniel Anthony are also part of that thing there. And then I want to also show you this super cool little piece of glass I got. This is a wave, as you can see. It's a bubbler. Whoa. But it's this really nice color, green, and the lighting isn't quite right, but there's like secret stuff on here. Like there's like a translucent skull right here that'll pop in the right lighting. This piece is made by Black Sand Glass, my brother Joel, and Joel is a legend around here. He's been blowing glass, hand blown art for many years. He had a shop down by Uncle Robert's in Kalapana, his studio. Lots of heads come through there. He's big up on the on the dad scene. The brother knows his concentrates well. He's a good brother, and I'm really happy to pick up that piece of art from him there at the Cup. So yeah, shout out to Black Sand Glass, to Pakalolo Farmer, and many more, to my brethren. Matchmaker Genetics, that's Andrew, who sets up the Jungle Cup. And, you know, I'm sure I'm missing some, but there's a few right there, you know.
We'll get them next time.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, Rusty, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to get out of here. I'm starving, but this was killer. I hope I'm glad to tomorrow. Yeah. Good luck with everything out there, and definitely keep me posted on some of these bills as that kind of moves forward.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me on here again. Respect fine print, doing that thing, you know, and I'm happy to be a part of that. And Caleb, much love. We'll be in touch.
Signing off. Remember, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print. Peace. Bang.